Morning, everyone. I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our keynote for today, Susie Gomez, who is the CEO of the Inland Empire Community Collaborative. The focus of today's conversation is really going to be focused on our Inland Empire Children's Cabinet. Really, just to kind of set the stage a little bit, as we know, this group that we have here at 8 a.m., these types of groups, and like the Inland Empire Children's Cabinet, are really a culmination of our nonprofit organizations, our partners in the region, getting innovative and trying to figure out how do we address these issues impacting our community here in the Inland Empire. From sharing resources to sharing data, really just coming together and trying to use our collective power to solve these issues. Not just amongst us as colleagues, but really trying to build stronger relationships with our county governments, our leadership in the region. And so the Children's Cabinet is really just a product of that. And so I'm excited to have Susie here, who really in her role is sort of helping us stay organized, right? Her and her amazing team are really just ensuring that we're hitting our goals, we're doing what we need to be doing, we're putting words on paper and really trying to make things move as quickly as possible, especially because of the American Rescue Plan discussion that's happening as we speak. And so without further ado, I'd like to give the floor to Susie Gomez and have her talk a bit about her experience with the Inland Empire Children's Cabinet, give a quick status update, and then we'll have some time for Q&A shortly after that. So Ms. Susie, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Julian. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the gracious introduction, Julian. So for some of you on the call, you guys know me more as it relates to IACC and the work we do around capacity building for nonprofits. And as you said, I think these conversations that we started at 8 o'clock in the morning kind of bled into the 10 o'clock calls with Michelle's leadership. And then organically, this group with some seeds that were planted in other groups. And I think I'll start by saying the work isn't by one organization. As we're talking about the Children's Cabinet, it doesn't belong to the Community Foundation. It doesn't belong to IACC or anybody that's individually involved in the group. It is a we collective voice that we felt was important on behalf of children. And I think all of us, and there's many people on this call that I recognize today that know directly how this pandemic has affected children and families. And most notably for us is looking at the learning loss and the isolation, the mental health issues, the lack of preventative health care for our kids, right? It threatens really a generation of children. And this was a time that our voices were important for us to hear. But most importantly, I think it disproportionately affected our children, dire for Black, Indigenous children in poverty, our foster kids, our English learners, children in poverty itself. They are taking the brunt of what has happened here in COVID. And if not now, when would we have to be the advocates for the voices of children in this region following and during this pandemic? So it was, as Julian explained, this small group of us, the 10 o'clock group that first talked about, we were thinking, well, how could we move away from when we first were meeting around PPEs and then move into the conversations around childcare. And that's really how that first conversation started. And then IACC was doing coalition building with First Five providers and how we build coalitions and diversify our funding. And we said, is there a way of marrying those kinds of two efforts? And that's kind of how the original group started, right? Who else needs to be at the table? How can we include others? And then the idea, which it wasn't one person, I think it was collectively the group said, but instead of us always dividing ourselves by counties, here's San Bernardino, do we strategize with them? How do we strategize with Riverside? And we all know that conversation. We said, why can't we strategize together, right? And it's children, so everyone needs to be unselfish and unconditional in these conversations. And we started including First Fives and some of the larger anchor organizations around children. But it was also really critically important in this planning stage. And we did have a roadmap and I think it is important to note, Margaret Brodkin, if you don't know her, for Funding the Next Generation, does a lot of work in the state of California, just an extraordinary work around funding for children, designated funding for children. She was already part of a project we were doing, and we have brought her in. So she gave us a framework of how to build a children's cabinet. And we use those tools as we started moving forward on this children's table, children's bureau. We kind of went all over the place with it. And then who else needed to be at the table? And so the first meetings were in January. We've been meeting every month since then, with Julian's point, how now drafting this letter about what we need, strategizing around pillars that were important to us, a group, Corey Jackson, there's a lot of people that, it's just not my voice. There's a lot of people, smart people, way smarter than me, that are in this group making this work happen. Oh, I have a question. So the other thing I kind of want to elevate about the work as well, though, is the fact that we need support from you in the room and others as we start building out these cabinets or subcommittees. And if it's okay, Julian, if I can just share my screen really quickly, this would probably be the easiest way to kind of show the work that's already been done amongst the group. And I think Brian from my team is going to put it in the chat for you guys to have a copy. And you can see this now, yeah. So the first couple of meetings that we had, we really, because there's such diversity in the room already, and we know everyone has a passion or a mission for the programs that they do. And we had to move away from the fact that we needed to kind of land on maybe 4 or 5 pillars underneath the work that we did. So we knew most important to us was that advocacy and equity were really the umbrella for all the work we do, and had to be threaded amongst all the pillars that we have designed, or the group collectively designed. And so here they landed with basic needs. And within that, and I don't know if you can see the print is small, is homeless, safety, and foster kids. And then we also divided it by the age of children and the work that needs to be done. We included health and wellness, school health, community health workers, mental health, ACEs, because we had First Fives, and Loma Linda sits in the room. Beth, Bert, she's always the shining voice for our clients and children with disabilities. And then under education with Corey and his guidance around education and youth, childcare, again, sat in that pillar. And we also have some art organizations. Jennifer sits in the conversations, and those important voices are needed throughout all the pillars that were designed for this children's table. And what we're now doing is, within these 4 pillars, are creating subcommittees of work. And this is the movement that we're moving towards, getting people that have not participated or are unaware of the work that initially was just done around the framing, and how you can participate and join and have your voices, and most notably the voices of the clients and the families and the children that you serve, and that voice also sits at these tables. And as we move forward, we really know that that's going to be vitally important for whatever work we do. I think that's all I have, Julian, unless there's questions.
No, that's great. You took me back through memory lane. It makes it feel like it's been a year, and it's literally only been 3 months since since we've had these conversations. So thank you for that, Susie. You touched on it a bit, where there's this collaborative effort where it's a whole host of either practitioners, policy influencers, folks who actually work within the government, folks who are on the ground, providing these services. And so there's a reason why the document you just showed us that these are the top priorities at Elevated. And it was done through a survey. But maybe if you could touch a little bit as to maybe why were these issues picked? And I guess my question more targeted is, there are clearly struggles that our kids and families are going through that have only been further exacerbated because of COVID. Would you be able to touch a little bit on maybe some of the struggles that our families and our kids are going through that maybe have led to us prioritizing these pillars within the cabinet?
Yeah, and I think, like at the beginning, I think all these systemic barriers that have been in place for all of our kids for a long, long time, right? It just literally put a light and even exacerbated the lack of resources and or services on their behalf, and really the access or the barriers to assessing the services and supports that they need. So if there were already limited resources, which we knew was what was happening in our region, and then you exacerbate it with the fact that you have less access now for them because they're at home, or no eyes on children, that we know that there is going to be increased numbers of abuse and neglect, and a lot of mental health support that's going to be required as children start entering back into the school districts, and you start having eyes on these kids, right, that we've not had eyes on. And especially, and I worked in the field of disabilities for almost 22 years. So we know also a year without any kind of services and supports on behalf of children and adults with disabilities is catastrophic, right, for them and their families. So I think hearing that, and I think back to the point, we knew that the catalyst for all of this was childcare. And frankly, it truthfully still is. I just saw this morning the report that we just sent out. But unless we can address the childcare issues, the economy doesn't come back, because women haven't come back to work. And with women are children and families. And so I think that was why that was the first conversation for the 10 o'clock group was childcare, but it threads itself through all the recovery work that has to be done on behalf of children. I think it also speaks to the fact that we need to look at other models other than the ones we're traditionally used to rely on in order to continue to do our services. And to that point is outside the realm of only looking at either the county or the state or a foundation. We need to be creative about how we're looking at designated funding for kids, and perhaps opening our eyes on other ways on how to be smarter about working together. And I think that this project has demonstrated the resilience, but also the commitment in this region, right? We are telling a different story about the Inland Empire by the fact that this work and this group is working, right? I think they don't see us as being as progressive as out in LA or San Francisco or whatever it is, but I think there is pockets and groups of us now knowing how powerful the voice of a few of us can have and the impact that we are having, and especially if it's something as notable as working on behalf of children.
And you, once again, you touched on it, which is we do have the Children's Cabinet as one example of how our agencies and partners in the region are coming together to really, utilize our strengths and identifying potential solutions. Are there any other examples that you could possibly highlight of how partners or how agencies, whether it's government, nonprofit, CBOs, coming together, especially during a time like COVID, to help, at least ease some of the burden during this time?
I think, I think I'm in an extraordinarily privileged position for me because I work with so many nonprofits, and our collaborative has almost 87, but also the fact that there's such a diverse, from faith-based organizations to all volunteer to, some big anchor organizations that are part of our collaborative. And all of them are struggling a little bit different, to your point, right? And what I do see the commonality about it is this willingness to help one another at a level that, yes, it has happened before. And I'll speak to the group that we're doing some work with that are First Five providers. They provide parenting classes for children. There's some of you on the call. I see Alex and Diana, they're on the call. And they came together saying, okay, we can't survive competing with one another. Our voice collectively will have a stronger impact around children and parenting and abuse and neglect if we work smarter together. Some of them had never written a federal proposal. And, our charge as being the AACC is having the charge of bringing and coalescing this group around a central idea on behalf of 10 providers for children. How can they work together smarter? And how can they sustain themselves when a traditional form of funding disappears and they can still be here providing services? And that was our charge. And I see that group incredible growth, applications and success in writing federal proposals, success and for the first time working together instead of competing with each other, work on changing state policy around their curriculum, right? Advocates that they've never been. And I think that leads back to the voice around advocacy. We sometimes don't, as nonprofits, don't see us as social justice organizations or advocacy organizations, but this time has required all of us to be advocates. And even when we don't see ourselves that way, and I know I see Margarita's on the phone, I think sometimes they see that in us before we see it in ourselves, and they give us opportunities for us to show the best of who we are.
That's it. That's right. And, you know, we've talked a bit about, you know, what the current struggles are, how this children's cabinet is coming together to identify solutions. One of those, right, is in regards to the American Rescue Plan and how we are putting this joint letter together, right, collaboratively to, you know, to not only frame the situation that you just talked about, but really make this more solution oriented and saying, look, we have a network of phenomenal organizations on the ground doing the work. Let us partner with you in helping solve the issues in front of us, not just short term, but long term. And so looking at it from that lens, and we've shared this information with this group in the past, but you know, do you have any, you know, pitches or advice for this group about how do we get more folks involved in this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, generally speaking, we have a good, solid group of organizations, and it's really well represented. But you know, we want to ensure that there's more collaboration, that the folks have a seat at the table. Do you have anything you can share with the group here about how they might be able to engage and help support these efforts?
Yeah, thank you, Julian, for asking. And he knows me already, so you know, we thought about that and our team put together, there's actually a link that either Brian or Claudia will put in the chat. Our idea is, you know, let us know, we kind of showed you the pillars that we're working on. We really are calling on all of you for your voices and the voices of the clients you provide services for. If you're interested in education or health or foster kids or, you know, whatever services you provide, we need to have your voice. And as we're growing now, so are these subcommittee work. And to the point is, now is where the work begins, to be honest. It's the planning is important and putting some framework around it is important, but the hard work comes next. And we really want you to be part of that and ensure that we're not missing a voice at the table as we start making harder decisions. And, you know, as opportunities come in front of us, right, as this new American Rescue Plan funding, right? Because as Michelle spoke about the letter on behalf of nonprofits, we as a Children's Cabinet are also submitting a letter saying how we are coming to you saying, this is how San Bernardino Riverside think you should invest in children. And these are the following investments you think we think you should look at, right? And think you should prioritize. That's a different conversation than waiting to see if the county, what money they're going to give us, right? So I think it is a shift on us taking some control over the narrative and also not just saying, but being part of the conversation around what happens for children. Include us, sit us at the table for us to have those conversations. So I know it is literally, tell us where you're interested. We'll make sure you get included in any future meetings as they come up and the subcommittee work that we'll be planning. So as Julian, you said, right now, all of this work is being done because we know it needs to get done. And all of us think, can't add another thing to my work I do, but this is important work and it requires us to model what that looks like. So in some way, the IE Children's Cabinet represents that unselfishness around all of us to do something for children right now.
Thank you, Susie. You know, thank you so much for your leadership. Our community truly is much better off because you are engaged. So thank you so much. We've got a few minutes here to open up the floor here for any questions you all may have. There's actually quite a few of us here too that are part of the Children's Cabinet, which will be happy to help kind of chime in as well. And I see Karthik just raise his hand.
Me too, yeah. Thank you, Jillian. So the question I have is something you touched upon, Susie, and I'm wondering, in addition to you, if others can kind of weigh in, including Michelle, Margarita, and whoever else. And it's this notion of changing systems. So it's not just kind of what we might think of as like kind of the progressive advocates or the power builders. So, just wondering if you can kind of reflect on, when you have allies within government agencies and people in like service providers, they're all aligned on values and the kind of priorities that they see. If you could just elaborate a bit more, I know it's not easy work to do, but any suggestions you have, any learning in terms of how to do that, in which you're able to keep that broad table together, and it's part of it is kind of transformational work, but some of it is also transactional, in which literally in terms of dollars that need to come down, contracts that need to be signed, and the work that needs to happen. And I see ICC as in that space, that pretty diverse space. So any thoughts you might have, Susie, and even others, in terms of how to do that work better, and how is that happening? How is that proceeding in this region?
Yeah, I thank you, Karthik, for that. It is something we also struggle with at times, but I think to the point, I think the idea that you do have to have some backbone support for this kind of effort. And I know we talk about it a lot, but you can put a lot of people in a room and say, this is a good idea, but if there's not, deliverable. So I think if you say, what is a takeaway? You need to have, even anytime you meet, we're going to finish something, we're going to do something. As to, Julian's first comment to me at the beginning, I'm the taskmaster in the meeting, because if you keep meeting and nothing happens, right, you're not going to keep a group coalescing or building or feeling like their time and their efforts are of value. So I would say that make sure that you also have a space for the voices, all the voices in the table. And that is sometimes a challenge, to be very candid. In a room where you have Loma Linda and you have a first 5 directors in the room, and you have, smaller nonprofits that are also sitting in the room, it's hard voices to be heard and intimidating for some that have never been in that space. To the point, though, I think as a moderator, as a mediator between that, is you ensure that you have, they feel like all of them have an equal voice in how this moves, right? And I think that's a lesson we've learned in 10 years of collaborative work, is there's no difference between any of us in this room. All our intentions are good. Our values are the same, meaning that all our voices are the same. And that is what gives you the strength to be able to keep moving, because it's easy to get distracted by how one entity in the room wants to do something.
Hey, I see, Michelle, you have a question as well?
Yeah, it's sort of a question and a comment, and it's what kind of drew me, Susie, as we're learning from Margaret Brodkin and the Children's Funding Project and what other parts of California have done. I think as we have centered youth voices, we've centered racial equity, funds will be value neutral unless we elevate that value of what we want to see be fundamentally different coming out of COVID. This is really like not putting up with talking about childcare and early childhood education as something that's really important, but never really doing anything about it. So we're gonna see a lot of dollars flowing in. Children can be at the center of all of those. Racial equity can be at the center. And I think the transformative process is, Karthik, that relationship when the powers that be really allow us to co-design and co-create the solutions. And so that's what we need to build now, is the power that can't be ignored. And I will acknowledge that the dollars, it's very value neutral, what we have right now. And so we're going to have to kind of sharpen the point of, but this is what we want to see changed, because the narrative will be, these are handout dollars. We heard it, we're just going to keep people from working if we help them with rental assistance. Like, no. These are children's lives. If you don't help with rental assistance, you are destroying families, and we can get over this together. And there's an economic development side to it, and blah, blah, blah. So I think that's some of the work. And I've really appreciated learning about some of these other examples where people have put children at the center of their local and county governments.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm reading the questions also coming in from the chat box, and Margarita raised a great point around needing to uplift youth and youth programs as well. I'll high level just mention that the ARP letter that's being put together, there are 4 top priorities that are being listed, and one of those is youth and youth programming in the Inland Empire. Margarita, I'm not hate to put you on the spot, but would you want to maybe speak a little bit about this, just to kind of bring some awareness for our group here who may not be as familiar?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I was just really curious about, there's definitely a lot of work to do just to address the issues impacting children and their families. And I guess what I'm curious about is, how do we the way that young people are organizing in this region to address not just education, which directly impacts them, but also climate justice, economic justice, racial justice, and I think groups that are coming together and sort of organize our folks to come together.
It sounds like you're driving. We caught some of that. I'm not sure if Susie or anyone else on this call caught some of those. Did anyone want to address Margarita's questions?
I think I heard some of it in terms of issues like climate justice and economic justice, and I think kind of youth themselves being centered in the work. I mean, I think it's one thing. I'll just quickly say some of the framing research we've done. The children frame is really powerful when you think about folks that are, really don't have as much agency and control, and so there's a set of social benefits that you can say, like, there's a reason why, when it comes to gun control, Sandy Hook was so powerful. When you think about children as helpless, there's a bunch of dollars that can come in. The narrative for youth is totally different. I mean, these are young adults, really, and to kind of center them and have their voices be centered as kind of having that agency does seem different. So I saw a thumbs up from Margarita, so I think maybe that's where you're going with some of like young people's voices and their priorities.
Yeah, and I think Corey's not on this call, but Corey has, throughout these conversations, that has been elevated in the group and the work and the meetings and the subcommittee work is around youth and youth justice, racial and economic justice. And I think it is some of the work, the harder work that's going to be being done in some of these subcommittees for those that are interested in that. And Margaret Brocken actually has a lot of, so I forgot that piece. As one of the layers of support for us, we applied as the IE Children's Cabinet for a position of 10 that were selected through the state of California to get support from both the Children's Funding Institute and the Funding the Next Generation. So we have behind us this endeavor, some funding and support by Margaret to organize and including consulting work for the next year for this project. So that is also really, really fortunate for us. And a lot of that work is around youth. There's several organizations that help with that work and framing that. So we're looking forward to getting support from them.
Yeah. And I thank you, Susie. And I think it's also worthy of noting, because I'm looking again at comments and questions in the chat box. So of the 4 top priorities, right, we talked pretty heavily about childcare, as that's our top priority in this group. We mentioned the youth and youth programming. There's also ACEs and housing security as kind of rounding out the top 4 priorities for the Children's Cabinet. And so if those are areas that you're passionate about, we'd love to have you be a part of the conversation, because we are now at a point with this cabinet, and now that we've identified the pillars and this sort of umbrella of what we're going to be working under and within, now we're going to start getting to work as to what does that mean, and how do we partner with our counties and our other colleagues in the region to ensure that we are hitting the marks that we need to address the issues that are facing our families in the region. And so if those are your particular areas that you are an expert in, we'd love to have you be a part of the conversation to help design that in collaboration. We got a couple minutes left here. Any other questions from the team here?
I guess maybe if if folks wanted to learn more and get in touch, is it Susie the person to contact then?
Yeah,
right?
yeah. If that's okay, Susie, hopefully
Yeah,
you don't
no
mind your
worries.
inbox.
Yeah,
getting-
no worries.
All right.
And then the survey, if you're interested in specific cabinet, but also that puts you on our mailing list for any future meetings and some of the subcommittee work. Claudia Montoya just put the survey in the chat for you. And then that way, that's actually the easiest way, because then once we get your email, we'll make sure we put you on the list. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thank you once again, Susie, for doing this with us today. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you. Anybody have any further questions, please feel free to reach out to Susie, myself, or anyone else in the Children's Cabinet. We are here to serve and look forward to hearing from you. So thank you, Karthik, for having this day highlighting this work. We appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Jillian. See a couple of other folks here, and maybe I'll just, without any warning, I'm just going to see if I can call on them for updates. I saw Armando Carmona. And Armando, I know that the Inland Empire Media Roundtable meeting is later today, but the website has been updated. So I don't know if you can share what's going on there in terms of, the future of IEMR or whatever the acronym is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Karthik. And I was ready for the call out this time.
That's great. You know me by
You
now.
can call on me. No, but we're really excited to continue moving forward the Inland Empire Media Roundtable with Voice Media Ventures, with you all at the Center for Social Innovation. And we did, we're revamping the website. We have a new website, and it's iemediaroundtable.com. And it's the same content, but it's just now it's a lot nicer and fancier. But we're continuing that work. We're hoping to work with Riverside County on a vaccine outreach campaign. And today we actually at 11:30 a.m. we have the media briefing. We're going to be hosting this board supervisor and chair Karen Spiegel, as well as Leslie Altamirano, a Jurupa Valley City Council member, and a couple other folks such as yourself, Karthik, speaking about the innovation report and really just giving an update on the region for media and for reporters.
Thank you, Armando. And I'll just give Armando props with all of you. He joined on April 9th. We had a national funder briefing on vaccine equity and civic infrastructure. And Armando represented the Inland Empire very strongly at that session. So I guess anyone interested, they should get in touch with you and Marla, Armando, is that right? So for example, if people have anything they want to give as a kind of press release, et cetera, they can send it to you and you'll distribute it to the list.
Yeah, we're working on kind of streamlining that process just to keep folks informed. But we're right now we've been focused obviously on the vaccine outreach and trying to get resources for media on that effort, and bringing in stakeholders from the community, so from different foundations, from different elected officials, and just different CBO leaders as well.
Great, thank you, Armando.
Yeah,
next I see Damien. Go ahead, Damien.
Yeah, I have a couple things. One, it relates to the IE Media Roundtable and also the TCCP. So there's been conversations happening, obviously, within the hospital community about vaccine uptake and trying to get the numbers of people that are taking the vaccine up. And I understand that there's a conversation, at least within the Greater Riverside Chamber of Commerce, around the same thing. I'm not sure if there's been any cross conversation between the tremendous amount of work that's already happening within at least those two circles and the other. So I wanted to bring that up, and I can make the introductions that are necessary via email, but wanted to see if there was any current conversation already happening that I wasn't aware of. That was the first thing. Armando, I think.
Yeah, I guess I missed the question, Damien. So in terms of TCP, saying that's what's happening, but I missed the question part of it.
So has there been conversations with the outside of those that show up at the TCCP with other local hospitals or the business community around vaccine, people taking the vaccine?
Not to my knowledge, but I mean, let's bring that up. And Paula's here. Carla had to jump off to Ventura County, kind of touch base with the community foundation we have there. But seems to me that maybe working with the county health agencies would be the best way to go about it to touch the hospitals, but open to suggestions, and maybe we can organize in advance of the next TCCP meeting on that one.
Okay, so just knowing that will help me frame the introduction. But the other thing, touching on a little bit of the children's cabinet that we've really enjoyed taking part in, and also IE Rise, is that there was some talk around how the work around children also affects work around housing and work around environment and so on and so forth. And I just want to remind everybody that IE Rise is a space where those sectors can come together. And we've been in conversation actually with Susie and with Corey and with some others, and we'll probably be looking at workshopping some of that work happening around children at one of our upcoming meetings, so that we can actually talk about what we all need to be doing together. And the other thing that came to mind was that I think maybe part of the takeaway from what we heard from Susie this morning is that regardless of what sector you're in, this type of organizing work to solidify the message, the narrative, and drive it in the minds of decision makers can happen within every sector. It just takes getting together and having those tough conversations and really coming up with a very clear message, which is happening both in the children's cabinets, also happening in the Inland Southern California Housing Collaborative, but it needs to happen, I think, in every sector. So wherever you're involved, I would encourage you to do that. And if you'd like any help, I'd be happy to help bring those groups together.
Great, thank you, David. Well, since you brought it up, folks are dropping off, but I'm wondering if you could just give a brief update. And I think we might need to give another update later in terms of, what the 2.0 version of IE Rise looks like. And I mean, CSI is playing a role, but Parkview Legacy has kind of stepped up, and you in particular, Damien. So I'm wondering if you could just share kind of early.
Sure. So just a quick update, and it's a little bit premature to have this yet because the steering committee just met last week. But in that meeting, Inland Empowerment had mentioned that they needed to take a step back from the facilitating role that they've played up to this point. Though up to this point, every track has a vision. We have a collective vision. We have a plan for this next year in terms of benchmarks that we've all agreed to meet together within our respective tracks. So things are on a good track, but they just needed to step to the side and focus on their core work. And so in the meantime, until we know exactly what the 2.0 version of IE Rise will look like, Parkview Legacy Foundation has stepped forward to make sure that we protect everything that's gone into this work, and we still give it the support it needs to get from here to there. And so things are in a great place. Tracks are continuing to meet. And the steering committee will be meeting again in the next few weeks to talk about, one, give an update on the progress that we're making towards the goals that we agreed upon, and also decide what's next. And so if you're not involved in a track already, please reach out. I'll put my email in the chat here, and make sure that you can get involved.
Great, thank you, Damien. We're at open mic, so I don't know if there's anything else. I'm looking at, it's a little dangerous when people have their cameras on, and I see Brad, you've been so consistent in coming to these meetings. I'm just curious from Assemblymember Cervantes's office, and even just the work that you do, if there's anything that, in terms of the nonprofit sector where we can more productively engage. And the Assemblymember is also part of the JETI. I mean, she chairs the JETI Committee, Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy. So I'm just curious if there's anything you could share in ways that we could our sector could more productively engage with your office.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I know I don't talk a lot on here, but as Karthik mentions, I'm here pretty much every single week and listening to all the fabulous work everybody does, and it's an awesome learning experience. I love my Wednesday mornings because they're filled with great conversations about all the awesome work going on in the Inland Empire. So I mean, on one hand, on the legislation, I mean, if anybody has positions on bills that we'll be taking up in committee or anything like that, I mean, as Karthik mentioned, Assemblymember Cervantes chairs the Jetty Committee, Jobs, Economic Development, and the Economy. She also sits on the Public Retirement Committee, Communications and Conveyance. She chairs the Select Committee on Veterans Employment. So lots of different issues that you can engage with us there. We hold various various Jetty events in the district and whatnot that we make sure to email the Center for Social Innovation about. We have an entrepreneurship a training session coming up pretty soon for both small business owners and nonprofit leaders. So I think I might have emailed that. If I haven't, I'll make sure myself or Eddie, who's running the event, is doing so. That's that's how we go. I don't have a lot of updates on our actual specific legislative package, just because we're kind of waiting until things are for sure getting out of committee before we start trumpeting them. But by next week, we should have our legislative package more succinctly determined as what we think has a good chance of moving forward and what things kind of need to get shelved. Because as with everybody's legislative packages this year, along with last year, it's just significantly reduced due to the issues that COVID-19 presents to the legislative process.
Thank you so much, Brad. And I think we definitely please do send out about small businesses and entrepreneurship. I mean, it's especially when we think about economic recovery and equity. You know, you do have a lot of communities of color that own small businesses that were disproportionately harmed during the pandemic. So it'd be great to think about having that racial equity lens in the work as we think about small business assistance. Anything else, folks, before we close today? Okay, thank you, everyone. And see you all next week. I believe, I don't know, Paula, do we have an update on what the topic is next week? I should have it in the back of my mind, but we'll update folks on it. So it looks like folks are dropping out. All right, thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you, Dr. Karthik.